Hey guys, my name is Amber Calm. I'm an astrologer and I'm here to give you my predictions for 2021. So let's get into it. So 2021, what's happening there? I think that there's so much to say about what is to come. I will try my best to hit the most important things, but I don't want this video to be too long. So I'll do my best to condense it. If you are interested in learning more and want to learn more about all of the specific events and or are interested in how this might affect you personally, check out my site at calmspirit.com. I've got a blog on there and you can contact me for readings also. That being said, let's get into some of the big themes that I think are going to happen over the next couple of years based on these astrological transits. So, of course, I have to mention the Grand Conjunction. If you haven't heard about it, please check out my other videos. I'll link it below. It is a major event that is going to characterize the next 200 years, but especially the next 20 years. And I'll tell you about how I think that'll sort of play out for us. So this conjunction is going to be in Aquarius. So it's going to characterize things like being very focused on technology. I think there'll be a real increased focus on the scientific fields in general. I get the sense that space travel may come into focus, for example. Things may be more automated. Maybe we'll have robots or something like that. Spreading knowledge is also associated with Aquarius. And so I think that accessing knowledge may be easier for people. Getting education, for example, I think we'll see a real focus on distance learning because Aquarius is sort of distant by nature. He's social. He's a social sign that's about connecting as a community, but not really emotionally or face-to-face. So I think people will connect more, but it will be through technology. But I do think that information is going to be more easily accessible for people because of that. And we may even see new means for people to get that information. So maybe someone out there will develop new social media platforms, for example, or something along those lines. Another thing that I think will happen in relation to this theme is that people who have been in power for a really long time, like corporations or really wealthy families, I think that they're actually going to start losing a lot of power over the next 20 years. I think they will start to fade away and that the people who are not as wealthy are going to come more so into focus. So this is really great for minorities. It's going to bring a lot of humanitarian outlook in general. So this is going to be about equal rights. So this is great for equal rights for minorities. This is great for equal rights for gay people as well. I really suspect by the end of the 20 years that gay marriage will be legal in most parts of the world. And it's also really great for women. In fact, I think that there will be a lot more women that rise to power, even within a couple of years. Looking at both Biden and Harris's personal charts, I noticed some trends, and maybe I'll do a whole other video on that, but based on what I've seen, I really think that for some reason, Biden will not be able to finish his term, and that will make Kamala our first president, our first female president. So I think there's a really good chance either way that we will see the first female president and leaders across the world, not just in America. Again, humanitarian efforts are going to be focused on, this is not a good time to be in a field that is really old school. Like old school way, like banking maybe, for instance. I think banking is going to change a lot less like face-to-face stuff and a lot more electronic. I think it's trending that way anyway, but it's going to ramp up immensely. Any of those sorts of fields that are like old school, like insurance, maybe it's going to change into mostly electronic. So if you're in a version of that that's more face-to-face, I think that's going to probably suffer and things like that. But that being said, and this is a really great time to be in fields like technology, anything technologically related. Eclectic spirituality will see a huge uptick in this time. I think older forms of spirituality are going to massively fade out, especially over the next 20 years. I think things like Christianity will probably be the minority in 20 years, whereas alternative forms of healing will really be popular. Astrology will really be popular, and all sorts of things like that are probably going to come more so into focus. It's also a really great time to be in the field of education or anything like that. And also a great time for any kind of social media work. Anybody who is not doing digital marketing or having digital means of dealing with their customers is going to suffer a lot over the next 20 years. So I think a lot of people have been waiting for things to go back to the same after this, and I really don't think that's going to be the case. I think that is going to ultimately change the way we conduct our lives forever. Now, I even think, and this one's a little a strange prediction, but I even think that a focus might come onto space and aliens. I really feel that at the end of the 20 years, maybe it will be more widely accepted that aliens exist for some reason. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, if you watched my video about the Grand Conjunction, I talked about how this is also about groups sort of coming together. So I think that there will be a little bit more of a globalization in some way. And I think that we will see a lot of previous countries or previous forms of power really break apart and change and reconnect in a new way. So it'll be interesting to see what government really looks like at the end of the 20 years. But I think our version of democracy will change dramatically. And what that means exactly is really hard to guess because we're talking about Aquarius and Uranus here, and he is the most unpredictable planet. So it's very difficult to get specific, but I do think that global efforts will prevail and there'll be a lot of like grassroots type movements during that time. Now, you can actually look up the vaccine. I'm sure a lot of you have questions about the vaccine and COVID. You can actually look up the vaccines chart. It has its own chart, believe it or not. And maybe I'll do a whole video on that. But based on what I saw, I think that it is mostly good. I think the intention of it is very good. I don't think it's a conspiracy or made to hurt people purposely. I think it will largely be a good thing. That being said, I do think there will be a small amount of people that will have side effects, of course, like any vaccine. The side effects, I think, may have to do with vision or something to do with your lungs. But regardless of that, what's certain is that the vaccine will definitely change the way healthcare is done in a really major way. I don't know if that means that people will have to provide documentation that they've had certain vaccines to travel, for example, or will have new types of ways of travel or things like that. But regardless, things will definitely not go back to normal in those ways. I don't think that the issue of COVID is going to completely go away next year for some reason. It may be that some people will be so resistant to the vaccine. It might also be that there'll be other forms of disease that come out and become a problem. So we'll see how that plays out. I ultimately do think, though, that progress will reign and win over it. And ultimately, we will see a lot of jumps in the healthcare system in general over the next couple of years, and especially in the next 20. I think they'll be able to find a lot of ways to cure diseases that haven't been cured in the past and make other medical advancements like that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how some of these might play out dates-wise. So a major thing that you want to understand about what's happening next year is there will be 3 conjunctions between 2 major planets, Uranus and Saturn. And I think that's really interesting because both of these planets are associated with Aquarius. Saturn is actually Aquarius's traditional ruler, but Saturn really represents tradition and the old ways. So this is going to bring a lot of clashing between the new and the old ways. I think there will be a lot of people that see these changes and really react badly to that and want to rebel against it and break away. We might even see people try to break away within the US, for example, or other countries too. Maybe people will break away from the EU, for example. I think this whole cycle is really going to start a lot more with people wanting to really resist the changes that are happening. I think a lot of people may see it as very Big Brother-y or New World Order-y or something like that. Regardless of them rebelling against it, it's definitely going to happen, and there's really no way to stop it at this point, but there certainly will be some infighting as this restructuring is occurring over the next 20 years. So some of the dates for that, Uranus and Saturn are going to square exactly in February, June, and December. So I suspect that during those times, we will see a lot of uprising, protests, maybe even, I don't want to speak into existence, but maybe some sort of attack of some kind. These are most likely to happen in places that are undergoing these big changes to their governments, especially democratic governments like the US, maybe even Canada or other places in Europe, or maybe Hong Kong or something like that. Now, next year, all of the eclipses are happening in Sagittarius and Gemini. Now, both of these signs are about communication and learning. And so I think this really emphasizes this concept of thinking more about concepts, communicating with each other, sending messages far, teaching things. Again, I think there'll be new social media platforms maybe. This is a really great time, as I think I said earlier, for digital marketing and being in social media, by the way. But the focus will shift away from materialistic pursuits. So influencers in the past that have been really materialistic are going to be a lot less popular. So if you're an influencer, I would really recommend that you take on a humanitarian effort or spread some useful information and be a bit more new age. Being very materialistic and showing off how rich you are is probably not going to go over as well for the next 20 years. But that being said, the eclipses in Sagittarius and Gemini, again, really make me think that there's going to be a lot of new forms of thinking and new forms of communication. The other thing, the one last thing that I really wanted to talk about were the Mercury retrogrades. There are always 3 Mercury retrogrades every year. And this year, they're all in air signs. And that's interesting because the Grand Conjunction is also in air signs. Now, it's interesting that these are all happening around the same times as the exact Uranus square Saturns. For example, the first one is going to start in Aquarius, and it is at the end of January 30th to February 19th. And as I said, Uranus is going to square Saturn around February. So I think that's really going to be people sort of fighting back again. There being people resisting things. In fact, I noticed that Inauguration Day in particular looked really spicy, has a lot of really intense events, and is sort of the ending of all of these tumultuous events we've seen in 2020. They do one last little dance there with an added Uranus square that's really intense. So I think that around Inauguration Day and right after it is going to be problematic in some way. The next Mercury retrograde is going to be May 31st to June 21st, and this one's going to be in Gemini. So again, that is still coincides with another Uranus square Saturn, which is happening around June. So I think this is going to be thinking back on the way things have done before, people fighting back, people protesting or communicating something, rethinking how we communicate with each other, maybe in some way. And the last Mercury retrograde is luckily on its own in October. It's going to be around September 28th to October 16th, and this one's in Libra. And it is luckily without a Uranus square Saturn. So I think this one is going to be more about the world rethinking who they are allied with, who are they partnered with. I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot of people ally with other countries or split away, or there's just going to be a lot of these sort of tumultuous changes. And even within the US, I think we'll see a lot of, again, grassroots and people like breaking away and trying to fight against these new restrictions or requirements that are coming. Ultimately, though, I will say, I want to leave on a positive note. Ultimately, I think that these changes are ultimately meant to benefit the whole and not just the few, because the way the world has really been run over the past really forever, maybe, I don't know, for a long time, has really benefited a very small group of people where, and people that, you know, even women are left behind to some degree, but especially minorities and gay people and all sorts of stuff, right? Or people in certain countries that are not valued to the level that they should be, or their human rights are not as protected. That is not going to be considered acceptable over the next 20 years. And so I think that's ultimately a good thing. I think the changes at first are going to be really bumpy because there are going to be a lot of people that are really pushing against it. But I also think that ultimately everybody is going to really try to come together to fight against an enemy outside of us. I noticed some transits and things that made me think there might be some more like kind of natural disasters that are happening in the world. Not to alarm anybody, but I do think there might be maybe some earthquakes or some sort of storms, wind related natural disasters. And some of this is and so some of this is what people are going to want to come together and work against. People are going to want to work against disease. People are going to want to work against these natural disasters and global warming and so on. That's going to be the large amount of people, and that's the direction it's really going. So even though there are people that are going to be fighting that, ultimately, I think by the end of the 20 years, we will have made huge advancements in dealing with disease and healthcare and global warming and human rights and all of these things. So I think ultimately this is a really good thing in that way. I also think this is a really good time for people that have their own businesses, believe it or not, because Aquarius is a very independent sign. So I think we'll see a lot of people that do freelance work or are self-employed or have various forms of this. I think we'll see start to arise, and this is a good time to do that actually. So if you're somebody who has such a business or wants to have such a business, again, as long as it's in a forward thinking field, I think that you'll really start to see a lot more traction. And that's again, technology, new age healing or practices, and education. So those are going to see a real push and uptick. And my tip to you is to do a lot of digital marketing, spread yourself out amongst a lot of different social media platforms. Don't just focus on one, especially like Facebook, I think might start getting cracked down on a lot more. So just make sure you focus on a lot of different social media, because this is a great time to do that. It's a great time to connect with people in that way, and you'll likely see a lot of success in doing that. So I'm excited for a new world. I'm excited for things to improve and get better. And I'm very optimistic going forward. But if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to comment below or shoot me a message. Good luck, everyone. I hope everyone has a great 2021.